Commander Jake Morrison stood in front of the massive screen on the bridge of the Harmony of Worlds. The ship was huge, bigger than most space stations. It belonged to the Galactic Council and carried representatives from over 200 different alien races. Jake was the only human on board. The screen showed a map of the entire galaxy. Millions of stars twinkled like tiny diamonds. Green lines connected thousands of worlds where different species lived. Blue paths marked the major trade routes that ships used every day. Red zones showed dangerous areas where pirates might attack. Everything was clearly labeled and organized, but there was something strange about this map. At one edge, it simply stopped. No more green dots. No more blue lines. Just empty black space with a simple white border and words that said, "Human territory navigation restricted." Jake had been staring at this map for 20 minutes. Other crew members walked past him, but they always got quiet when they saw him looking at the human section. The aliens would whisper to each other in their own languages, then quickly move away. "You look troubled, Jake." The voice belonged to Dr. Elena Rodriguez. She was one of the few other humans in this part of space. Elena worked as a scientist, studying different alien species and how they lived. "Not troubled," Jake said. "Just thinking." Elena moved beside him and looked at the map. "About what? Do you ever notice how they never ask about our space?" Jake pointed at the restricted zone. "I mean, these aliens are curious about everything. They ask about our food, our music, our history, but they never ask why such a big part of the map is marked as off-limits." Elena frowned. She had been working with aliens for 8 years. Jake was right. In all that time, not one alien had ever asked her about the restricted zones. They asked about Earth, they asked about human colonies, but they never asked about the empty spaces beyond human territory. "Maybe they think it's rude to ask," Elena suggested. "Since when do the Zephyrians worry about being rude?" Jake laughed. The Zephyrians were known for asking personal questions about everything. "Last week, Ambassador Skrek asked me how often humans go to the bathroom." Elena had to smile at that. "Point taken." On the other side of the bridge, a group of alien delegates were having a meeting. There was Ambassador Skrek, the tall blue Zephyrian with 4 arms. Next to him stood Commander Thale, a short fuzzy creature from the Court Empire. Several other aliens gathered around them, all speaking in hushed tones. Jake could hear some of their conversation. They were planning the next big exploration mission. The Galactic Council wanted to map new areas of space and look for more habitable worlds. The population of the galaxy was growing, and they needed more room. "We could explore the Andorian Nebula," Commander Thale was saying. "Our scouts report many star systems there." "What about the regions near the spiral arm?" asked another alien. "Lots of potential there." Ambassador Zrek pulled up a smaller map on his tablet. "Here are the areas we should focus on." He pointed to several sections of space. All of them were far away from human territory. Jake walked closer to the group. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I couldn't help but overhear. If you're planning exploration missions, human ships could help. We have some of the fastest scouts in the galaxy." The aliens all turned to look at him. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Ambassador Zrek cleared his throat. "That is very kind, Commander Morrison, but we have enough ships for these missions." "Are you sure?" "The regions you're talking about are pretty far out. It would take months to get there with standard ships. Human vessels could cut that time in half." Commander Thale shifted nervously. "We appreciate the offer, but we prefer to handle exploration with our own people." "What about joint missions then?" Jake pressed. "Humans and aliens working together." "The Council is always talking about cooperation between species." The group exchanged glances. Jake could tell they were uncomfortable, but he didn't understand. "Why?" Finally, Ambassador Zrek spoke again. "Perhaps we should discuss this later. We have many details to work out first." The aliens quickly dispersed, each finding reasons to be somewhere else. Jake was left standing alone, more confused than before. Later that day, Jake found himself in the ship's communication center. He had received new orders from Earth. "Captain, Ben Clark of the research vessel Discovery needed an escort for a scientific mission. The destination was near the galactic rim, close to the edge of known space. Jake read through the mission details. It seemed straightforward enough. The Discovery would be studying star formation in a nebula near the boundary of explored space. Several alien scientists would be joining the mission. Jake's job was to make sure they stayed safe, but there was something odd about the coordinates. The mission would take them very close to the restricted zone around human space. According to the mission parameters, they were specifically ordered not to go beyond certain coordinates. The boundary was marked very clearly. Jake wondered why such specific limits were needed for a simple research mission. The nebula they were studying was nowhere near any known dangers. There were no pirate bases in that area, no unstable stars, or black holes, just empty space. He pulled up the galactic map again on his personal tablet. The restricted zone was enormous. It covered almost a quarter of the galaxy's outer rim. What could be so important in all that empty space that humans needed to keep everyone else away? His tablet chimed with an incoming message. It was from Captain Ben Clark. Jake, good to hear you'll be joining us. I should warn you, some of the alien crew members seem nervous about this mission. Dr. Vex from the Altarian Republic asked me 3 times if we were really staying within the approved coordinates. Commander Krill from the Hegemony wanted to know if human ships would be patrolling the area. I told them it was just a science mission, but they still seem worried. Jake stared at the message. Why would experienced alien officers be nervous about a routine research mission? These were species that regularly sent ships into dangerous regions. They explored unstable star systems and flew through asteroid fields without blinking. But the idea of getting close to human-restricted space made them afraid. He decided to do some research of his own. Using his security clearance, Jake accessed the human military database. Most of the information about the restricted zones was classified far above his level. But he found some basic reports from patrol ships. The reports were strange. They talked about perimeter maintenance and boundary security, but never explained what they were protecting. There were references to deep space monitoring stations and early warning systems, but no details about what they were watching for. One report caught his attention. It was from a patrol ship that had responded to a distress signal near the boundary. The ship had found debris from an alien vessel, but no survivors. The report listed the cause as navigation error and recommended that the area be marked as hazardous, but Jake noticed something odd. The debris pattern didn't match a normal ship failure. It looked more like the vessel had been destroyed by weapons. Very advanced weapons that left energy signatures Jake didn't recognize. He was about to dig deeper when his access was suddenly denied. A message appeared on his screen. Information classified. Contact Fleet Command for authorization. Jake leaned back in his chair. In all his years in the human military, he had never had his access revoked like that. Someone was watching what files he looked at. Someone wanted to make sure he didn't learn too much about what was really happening in the restricted zones. As he sat there thinking, Jake realized something that made his blood run cold. Humanity wasn't keeping other species out of those regions because humans wanted to be alone. They were keeping something else in, something that the rest of the galaxy was better off not knowing about. The question was, what could be so dangerous that humans would sacrifice their reputation and relationships with other species to keep it secret? And how long could they keep that secret before whatever they were hiding broke free? 50 years earlier, Lieutenant Amy Foster sat in the pilot seat of the exploration ship Horizon. She was 26 years old, and this was her first deep space mission. The ship was small but fast, designed to go further than any human vessel had ever traveled before. How much further to the target coordinates? Asked Dr. Carl Bennett from his station behind her. Carl was the mission scientist, a thin man with gray hair who loved discovering new things. About 6 hours, Amy replied. We're already past the edge of known space. No one has ever been this far out before. The horizon was part of humanity's first attempt to explore beyond the galactic rim. Earth wanted to know what was out there in the vast darkness between galaxies. Most species stayed close to the galactic center where stars were thick and resources were easy to find. But humans were different. They always wanted to see what was over the next hill. Captain Roy Adams walked onto the bridge carrying a cup of coffee. He was a veteran officer with 20 years of experience. Any sign of other ships out here? Nothing on sensors, reported Sergeant Mike Turner from the weapons station. We're completely alone. The darkness outside the ship was unlike anything they had ever seen. In normal space, there were always stars visible in every direction. Here, the stars were few and far between. The nearest galaxy was just a faint smudge of light millions of years away. It's beautiful in a scary way, Amy said quietly. Dr. Carl Bennett was studying his instruments carefully. The energy readings out here are very strange. There's something moving in the darkness between the galaxies. Moving how? Captain Adams asked. I'm not sure yet. The signals are very faint, but there's definitely something large out there. Multiple large objects, actually. Amy checked her navigation display. We're approaching the coordinates now. Should I take us closer to whatever Carl is detecting? Captain Adams thought for a moment. Let's be careful. Move in slowly and keep all sensors active. As the horizon moved deeper into the empty space, the energy readings grew stronger. Dr. Carl Bennett became more excited with each passing minute. This is incredible. The objects are massive, bigger than anything we've ever encountered. Are they ships? Asked Sergeant Mike Turner. I don't think so. The structure is all wrong for ships, and they're moving in a pattern that doesn't match any known propulsion system. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. Something about this place felt wrong. The darkness seemed too thick, too heavy. Captain, maybe we should report back to Earth. Before we get any closer, let's get some visual confirmation first, Captain Adams decided. Amy, bring us within scanning range, but keep the engines ready for a quick exit. The main screen flickered to life as their sensors locked onto the nearest object. What they saw made everyone on the bridge go silent. It was a creature. But calling it a creature didn't really describe what they were looking at. The thing was the size of a small moon with a body that seemed to be made of living shadow. Tentacles that stretched for thousands of kilometers reached out into space, and along those tentacles, strange lights pulsed like a heartbeat. What in the world is that thing? Whispered Sergeant Mike Turner. Dr. Carl Bennett was frantically checking his instruments. It's alive, definitely alive. But the energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. And there are more of them. Dozens more. Amy watched in horror as more creatures became visible on the screen. They were all moving in the same direction, like a vast herd of animals migrating across an endless plain. But these animals were the size of moons, and they were heading toward the galaxy. They're moving toward populated space, Dr. Carl Bennett said, his voice shaking. If they maintain their current course and speed, they'll reach the outer colonies in about 70 years. Captain Adams gripped the arm of his chair. What do they want? I'm detecting massive energy drains wherever they pass, Carl reported. They're consuming something from every star system they encounter. Not the stars themselves, but something else. Something that radiates from living worlds. Amy realized what Carl was saying. They eat life. Not just life, Carl corrected. The life force itself. They're draining the energy that comes from living beings. Every planet they pass becomes completely dead. The creatures move slowly, but steadily through space. Behind them, star systems that had once glowed with the warmth of life were now cold and empty. Planets that had taken billions of years to develop complex ecosystems were reduced to lifeless rocks in a matter of days. How many populated worlds are in their path? Captain Adams asked. Dr. Carl Bennett worked quickly with his calculations. If they continue on their current course, they'll pass through human space first, then the Zephyrian Republic, then the core worlds. Eventually, they'll consume every living thing in the galaxy. The bridge fell silent as the full horror of the situation sank in. These creatures weren't just a threat to humanity. They were a threat to every species in the galaxy. Trillions of lives hung in the balance. We have to warn everyone, Amy said. The Galactic Council, the military, everyone needs to know about this. Wait, Captain Adams said slowly. Think about what happens if we tell them. What do you mean? Panic, Captain Adams explained. Complete chaos. Some species will try to flee to other galaxies. Others will fight each other for resources. The galaxy will tear itself apart long before these creatures arrive. Dr. Carl Bennett nodded sadly. He's right. Most species aren't ready for something like this. The knowledge alone could destroy galactic civilization. Sergeant Mike Turner stood up from his station. So what do we do? Just let them come? No, Captain Adams said firmly. We stop them, but we do it quietly. Amy stared at the captain. Stop them? How do we stop things that size? I don't know yet. But we have 70 years to figure it out. And we have one advantage that these creatures don't know about. What's that? They're expecting to find helpless prey when they reach the galaxy. Instead, they're going to find humans waiting for them. Over the next several hours, the crew of the Horizon gathered as much information as possible about the creatures. They learned that the beings moved slowly but were nearly impossible to damage with conventional weapons. They seemed to exist partially outside normal space, which made them hard to track and even harder to fight, but Dr. Carl Bennett discovered something important. The creatures followed energy trails left by living civilizations. They could sense life force from incredible distances and would always move toward the strongest sources. That gives us an opportunity, Captain Adams realized. If we can mask the energy signatures of populated worlds, maybe we can confuse them or lead them away. Or we could set up a defense line, suggested Sergeant Mike Turner. Make our stand. At the edge of the galaxy before they reached the inhabited systems, Amy was studying the navigation charts. The creatures will enter our space first. If we're going to stop them, we'll have to do it along the rim of human territory. Which means we'll be fighting alone, Dr. Carl Bennett said quietly. If we tell the other species, they'll panic. If we don't tell them, we'll have to face these things without help. Captain Adams made the decision that would shape humanity's future. Then we fight alone. We build defenses in secret. We develop new weapons. We train new soldiers. And we pray that when the time comes, we're strong enough to protect the galaxy. The Horizon began its long journey back to Earth, carrying with it the most important secret in galactic history. Amy Foster piloted the ship through the darkness, knowing that her species had just accepted the greatest responsibility imaginable. Behind them, the creatures continued their slow advance toward the galaxy. They had no idea that their prey had just become their predators. Humanity would spend the next 70 years preparing for a war that the rest of the galaxy would never know was being fought. When they finally reached Earth, Captain Adams filed a report that would be classified. At the highest levels, the official record would show that the Horizon had encountered dangerous radiation fields beyond the galactic rim. The area would be marked as hazardous and off-limits to civilian traffic, but in secret, the real work began. Military bases were built in the darkness between galaxies. Scientists developed new technologies designed to fight enemies that defied understanding. Soldiers trained for battles against creatures the size of moons, and through it all, humanity kept it secret. They accepted the burden of being the galaxy's guardians, knowing that the cost of failure would be the extinction of every living thing in known space. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of Defense Station Sentinel-7, watching the darkness beyond the galaxy. The station was invisible to normal sensors, hidden behind layers of advanced shielding that made it look like empty space. Outside? The windows, there were no stars. Just the cold black void between galaxies. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported Lieutenant Danny Parker from his sensor station. Same energy signature as before. Maria felt her stomach tighten. She had been commanding this station for 3 years, and every alert still made her nervous. Size and speed, about the size of a small asteroid. moving slowly toward the galaxy. Estimated arrival at the perimeter in 6 hours. Send word to Hunter Team 3, tell them we have another scout. Maria walked to the main display screen. It showed a 3-dimensional map of the area around the station. Dozens of small red dots marked the positions of Devourer scouts that had been detected over the past month. Most had been destroyed before they could report back to the main swarm. But they kept coming. The scouts were much smaller than the massive creatures that Amy Foster had discovered 50 years ago. They were sent ahead to test defenses and gather information. Each one that made it back to the swarm meant the main force learned more about humanity's preparations. Captain, incoming message from Hunter Team 3, reported Communications Officer Lisa Brown. Commander Phillips says they're ready to intercept. Tell them to proceed. And remind them to be careful. These scouts are getting smarter. Somewhere in the darkness, Commander Steve Phillips and his team were preparing for another battle that the galaxy would never know about. The Void Hunters were humanity's most elite soldiers, trained to fight enemies that existed partially outside. Normal space. Steve floated in the cockpit of his stealth fighter, checking his weapons for the 10th time. His team consisted of 4 other pilots, all veterans of dozens of similar missions. They flew ships that didn't officially exist, using weapons that had been developed in secret laboratories. Target acquired, reported pilot Jenny Clark over the radio. Looks like a big one this time. Steve could see it now on his display. The scout creature was different from the others they had fought. It was larger and moved with more purpose. Worse, it was heading directly toward a populated star system instead of just probing the defenses. This one knows where it's going, Steve said grimly. We can't let it reach the inner systems. The Void Hunters moved into attack formation. Their ships were sleek and black, designed to be invisible against the darkness of space. The weapons they carried had been built specifically to harm creatures that normal guns couldn't touch. Firing particle beams, Jenny announced. Streams of bright energy lanced out toward the creature. The beams were made from a type of energy that Dr. Nancy Wright had discovered could actually damage the Devourers. The creature twisted and writhed as the beams struck it, but it didn't stop moving toward the galaxy. It's shrugging off the hits, reported another pilot. We need heavier weapons. Steve switched to his ship's main gun. The weapon fired concentrated bursts of what the scientists called reality anchors energy that forced the creatures to exist fully in normal space. Where they could be hurt, the creature suddenly became solid and visible. Steve could see its true form now, a writhing mass of shadow and teeth the size of a building. It let out a sound that somehow reached through the vacuum of space, a noise like 1,000 voices screaming at once. Now! Steve shouted. All 5 ships opened fire at the same time. The creature dissolved into wisps of dark energy that faded into nothing, but Steve felt no satisfaction. Tomorrow there would be another scout, and another after that. Back on Defense Station Sentinel-7, Captain Maria Santos received the report that the threat had been eliminated. She marked another successful intercept on her log, knowing that somewhere in a classified file, this would become another training accident or equipment failure to explain why good soldiers never came home. Ma'am, incoming priority message. From Research Station Alpha, reported Lieutenant Danny Parker. Maria accepted the transmission. The face of Dr. Nancy Wright appeared on her screen. Nancy looked tired and worried the way she always did these days. Maria, we have a problem. The latest scout we captured before it was destroyed, we managed to analyze its memory core. What did you find? They're not just scouting anymore, they're mapping our defenses. The main swarm is using the information to plan a coordinated attack. Maria felt cold. How long do we have? Based on the data patterns, I estimate the main force will arrive in less than 10 years. And Maria... there are more of them than we thought. A lot more. The transmission ended, leaving Maria alone with her fears. 10 years wasn't much time to prepare for a war against creatures that could destroy entire solar systems. At Research Station Alpha, Dr. Nancy Wright stared at the data on her computer screen. The numbers were terrifying. The main devourer swarm contained thousands of the massive creatures that Amy Foster had first discovered. Each one was capable of draining the life from an entire planet in hours, but that wasn't the worst part. Nancy had discovered something else in the Scout's memory core. The devourers weren't just randomly consuming life energy. They were collecting it and sending it somewhere else. Somewhere beyond even their current position in the void. Dr. Wright? Her assistant, Dr. Bob Martinez, entered the laboratory carrying another datapad. The analysis of the energy transmissions is complete. Nancy took the pad and read the results. Her hands started shaking. The energy signatures match theoretical models for transdimensional communication, Bob explained. The devourers are sending the collected life force to entities in another reality entirely. Which means they're not the top of the food chain. They're working for something else. Something that exists outside our universe? Nancy sat down heavily in her chair. The situation had just become infinitely worse. Humanity wasn't just fighting to protect the galaxy from the devourers. They were fighting to keep something even more terrible from entering their reality, on Earth. Admiral Peter King sat in his office deep beneath the surface of the planet. The office was part of a vast underground complex that served as the command center for humanity's secret war. On the walls were displays showing the positions of defense stations, patrol ships, and hidden weapon platforms scattered throughout the restricted zones. Admiral King was reading reports from across the front lines. Captain Maria Santos reported, "Increasing scout activity near Sentinel-7, Commander Steve Phillips requested more advanced weapons for his Void Hunters." Dr. Nancy Wright warned that the main attack was coming sooner than expected. Every report brought worse news. The defenses were holding, but barely. Humanity was fighting an enemy that grew stronger every day while they grew more tired and stretched thin. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Dr. Kate Morgan entered, carrying a thick folder of papers. Kate was the chief psychologist for the Defense Project, responsible for helping soldiers cope with the stress of fighting an enemy that most people couldn't even imagine. "The mental health reports, Admiral. They're not good." Admiral King took the folder but didn't open it. He already knew what it would say. Soldiers suffering from nightmares about creatures the size of moons. Scientists driven to depression by the knowledge that one mistake could doom all life in the galaxy. Commanders breaking under the weight of secrets they could never share. How bad? Suicide rates are up 30% from last year. Half of our deep space personnel are showing signs of severe psychological stress, and Admiral ... They're starting to ask questions. What kind of questions? About their families. About whether the people they love will ever know what they died for. About whether it's fair to carry this burden alone. Admiral King nodded slowly. He had wrestled with the same questions every night for years. Was it right to keep the galaxy in ignorance while humanity sacrificed everything to protect them? Was it fair to let good people die as heroes that no one would ever remember? But every time he considered telling the truth, he remembered the chaos that would follow. Species fleeing in all directions. Wars breaking out over resources. The galaxy tearing itself apart long before the devourers arrived. "We hold the line," he said finally. "No matter what it costs us personally, we hold the line." Dr. Kate Morgan left, taking her reports with her. Admiral King returned to his displays, watching red dots that represented humanity's lonely vigil at the edge of space. Somewhere out there in the darkness, the enemy was coming. And when they arrived, they would find humans waiting for them, but Admiral King wondered how much longer his people could bear the weight of saving a galaxy that didn't even know it needed saving. Captain Ryan Davis was having a normal patrol when everything went wrong. His ship, the Guardian, was checking the outer defenses when the alarm started screaming. A Devourer scout had broken through the perimeter and was heading straight for the Zephyrian colony of New Haven. "How did it get past the sensor grid?" asked Lieutenant Sarah Kim from her station. "I don't know, but we have to stop it before it reaches the planet," Ryan replied. "There are 8 million civilians down there." The Guardian was a fast patrol ship, but not heavily armed. It was designed to watch for threats, not fight them. Ryan knew they were outmatched, but he also knew what would happen if the creature reached New Haven. 8 million people would die, and the galaxy would finally see what humanity had been hiding. All power to engines. We have to intercept before it enters the system. The Guardian raced through space, pushing its engines beyond safe limits. Behind them, more human ships were coming, but they were too far away. Ryan's crew was the only thing standing between the creature and disaster. "Contact in 60 seconds, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim. "The creature is twice the size of our ship." Ryan gripped his command chair. "Arm all weapons. We only get one chance at this." When the Devourer Scout came into view, Ryan felt his blood turn cold. The creature was a writhing mass of shadow and energy, with tentacles that reached out like grasping fingers. It moved through space as if the vacuum didn't exist, leaving a trail of twisted reality behind it. "Fire everything!" Ryan shouted. The Guardian's weapons blazed to life. Particle beams and energy torpedoes struck the creature, but they barely slowed it down. The Scout kept moving toward New Haven, now only minutes away from the planet. "Sir, we're getting a transmission from the colony," Lieutenant Sarah Kim reported. "They're asking what that thing is." Ryan realized with horror that the battle was happening in full view of the alien colonists. Telescopes on New Haven were already tracking both the Guardian and the creature. In a few minutes, the entire galaxy would know that humanity had been lying to them. "Send a message to Admiral King," Ryan ordered. "Tell him the secret is out." The Guardian made another attack run on the creature. This time, their weapons found a weak spot. The Scout writhed in pain and turned to face them, abandoning its course toward the planet. Ryan had succeeded in getting its attention, but now his ship was the target. Dark energy lashed out from the creature, striking the Guardian's shields. The ship shook like a leaf in a storm. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as systems began to fail. "Shields down to 20%, Sarah reported. "One more hit like that and we're done." That's when the rescue ships arrived. 3 Zephyrian vessels dropped out of hyperspace and immediately opened fire on the creature. Their captain, Commander Zale, contacted the Guardian. "Human vessel, what is that thing?" "Our weapons aren't hurting it." Ryan made a decision that would change everything. "Commander Zale, that creature feeds on life energy. Your weapons won't work because they use conventional technology. We've been fighting these things for 50 years. 50 years? What are you talking about?" Before Ryan could answer, the creature turned toward the Zephyrian ships. Dark energy struck Commander Zale's vessel, and Ryan watched in horror as the alien ship began to break apart. "Sarah, prepare the reality anchor," Ryan ordered. "Sir, that will reveal our classified technology." "I don't care. We can't let them die." The Guardian fired its secret weapon. A beam of silver energy struck the creature, and suddenly it became solid and visible. The Zephyrian ships immediately resumed firing, and this time their weapons had an effect. Together, the human and alien vessels destroyed the Scout. But the damage was done. The secret that humanity had kept for 50 years was finally revealed. At the Galactic Council headquarters, Senator Tim Walker stood before an emergency session of representatives from 200 species. The massive chamber was filled with angry voices demanding answers. Senator Walker was one of the few humans who knew the truth, and now he had to explain it to the galaxy. "Honored delegates," he began. "I know you have questions about what happened at New Haven. I'm here to provide answers." Ambassador Rex stood up from his seat. "Senator Walker, our ships detected technology that doesn't appear in any human records. Weapons designed specifically to fight the creature we encountered. How long have you been hiding this from us?" Tim took a deep breath. 50 years. The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Representatives from dozens of species demanded to know why humanity had lied to them. Others wanted to know what other threats were hidden in human space. "Please let me explain," Tim said, raising his voice above the noise. 50 years ago, human explorers discovered creatures in the void between galaxies. Massive beings that consumed the life force from entire planets. These creatures were moving toward our galaxy, following energy trails that would lead them to every populated world. The chamber gradually became quiet as the implications sank in. We faced a choice, Tim continued. We could warn the galaxy and risk causing mass panic and chaos, or we could quietly prepare defenses and face the threat alone. We chose to protect you, even if it meant accepting your distrust and fear. Commander Thale from the Court Empire stood up. You're saying these creatures are still out there? Yes, and they're still coming. Our scientists estimate the main swarm will arrive within 10 years. The news hit the chamber like a physical blow. 200 species sat in stunned silence. As they realized that their entire galaxy was under threat, Dr. Michelle Brown, working frantically at her research station, had just made the most important discovery in human history. The data from the destroyed scout had revealed something terrible. The Devourers weren't the real enemy. Admiral King, you need to see this, she said over the communication link. What is it, Michelle? The Devourers are running away. They're not invading our galaxy, they're fleeing into it. The life energy they collect isn't food, it's building material. They're trying to construct some kind of barrier. Admiral King felt his world turn upside down. A barrier against what? Something called the Void Lords, entities that exist between dimensions. According to this data, the Void Lords consume entire realities. The Devourers have been trying to build defenses against them for millions of years. The truth was worse than anyone had imagined. Humanity hadn't been preparing to fight invaders. They had been preparing to fight refugees. And behind those refugees was something infinitely more dangerous. Back at the Galactic Council, Senator Tim Walker was explaining humanity's preparations when Admiral Lisa Shaw entered the chamber. Lisa had been a lieutenant on the original Horizon mission 50 years ago. Now she was one of the most senior officers in the Secret Defense Program. Senator Walker, I need to address the council immediately. Tim stepped aside and Admiral Lisa Shaw approached the podium. The chamber was completely silent. Honored delegates, I was part of the mission that first discovered the threat 50 years ago. What Senator Walker told you is true, but it's not the complete truth. She activated a holographic display showing the data that Dr. Michelle Brown had just analyzed. The creatures we call Devourers are not invaders. They are refugees fleeing from entities called the Void Lords. These Void Lords exist outside our reality and consume entire universes. The Devourers have been collecting life energy to build barriers against them. Ambassador Zrek leaned forward in his seat. Are you saying we should help these creatures? I'm saying we don't have a choice. If the Void Lords break through into our reality, every living thing in every galaxy will die. The Devourers are the only thing standing between us and complete extinction. The chamber erupted again, but this time the voices weren't angry. They were afraid. Commander Thale stood up slowly. What do you need from us? Admiral Lisa Shaw smiled for the first time in years. Everything. Ships, weapons, scientists, soldiers. Humanity has been holding the line alone for 50 years. But this is bigger than any one species can handle. We need the entire galaxy working together. Over the next several hours, the Galactic Council voted to create a joint defense force. Species that had been suspicious of humanity for decades suddenly offered their most advanced technology. The map of the galaxy was redrawn, with the restricted zones around human space becoming staging areas for a massive military buildup. Dr. Helen Price, a young scientist fresh out of the academy, found herself assigned to one of the new joint defense stations. She worked alongside alien colleagues she had only read about in textbooks, preparing for a war against enemies from outside reality itself. Standing at the observation deck of Defense Station Unity, Helen watched ships from dozens of species working together to build the largest military force in galactic history. For the first time in 50 years, humanity wasn't alone in their vigil at the edge of space. The map doesn't end at human space anymore, said her alien colleague, a young Zephyrian named Tech. Helen nodded, watching the stars. No, it doesn't. It extends into the unknown, and we're all going there together. In the distance, the first Devourer refugees were arriving. Behind them, something moved in the darkness between realities. But this time, when the real enemy came, they would find not just humans waiting for them, but the combined might of every species in the galaxy. 2 years had passed since the galaxy learned the truth about humanity's secret war. The universe was a very different place now. Where once there had been suspicion and fear between species, there was now cooperation on a scale never seen before. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the new flagship, the Unity. The ship was 3 times larger than any vessel ever built, constructed with technology from over 50 different species. Jake had been promoted to Admiral and put in charge of the Joint Defense Fleet. "Admiral, incoming report from the Devourer Liaison," said Commander Ellen Davis from the communications station. Ellen had been one of the first humans to learn how to speak with the refugee creatures. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the strange form of what humans now called a Devourer ambassador. The creature looked like a small version of the massive beings they had once feared, but its energy patterns were calm and peaceful. "Admiral Morrison," the creature spoke through a translation device. "The barrier construction in Sector 7 is complete. We have successfully sealed another dimensional rift." Jake nodded. "Excellent work. How many rifts does that leave?" 17 major rifts remain open. The Void Lords are still attempting to break through, but our combined defenses are holding. It was hard to believe that these creatures had once been seen as enemies. The Devourers, it turned out, were actually called the Guardians in their own language. They had been fighting the Void Lords for millions of years, trying to protect reality itself from destruction. Dr. Elena Rodriguez walked onto the bridge carrying a datapad full of reports. She had become the chief scientist for the Joint Defense Project, studying both Devourer technology and the threat from the Void Lords. "Jake, we have a problem," she said quietly. "The energy readings from the deep void are increasing. The Void Lords are getting stronger." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "How much stronger?" "Enough that they might be able to break through our barriers within the next year. We need to accelerate the construction of the reality anchors." The reality anchors were massive weapons designed to seal dimensional rifts permanently. They were built using a combination of human engineering, alien technology, and Devourer knowledge. Each one took months to build and required the cooperation of dozens of species. "What do we need?" Jake asked. "More resources, more ships, and more volunteers willing to work in the deep void where the rifts are strongest." Working in the deep void was dangerous. The space between realities was hostile to normal matter. Ships could only operate there for short periods before the strange energies began to affect their crews. Many good people had been lost building the defenses on the factory world of New Prometheus. Chief Engineer Mark Taylor supervised the construction of the latest reality anchor. The weapon was the size of a small space station, bristling with arrays that could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. "How much longer until it's ready?" asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the project's lead scientist. Yuki was originally from Earth, but had spent the last 2 years learning Devourer science. 3 more weeks, Mark replied. "The power core integration is the most difficult part. We're essentially building a device that can cut holes in reality and then seal them shut. Around them, workers from a dozen different species labored side by side. Humans operated the heavy machinery while delicate-fingered Altarians handled the precision electronics. Strong hegemony workers lifted massive components while quick-thinking Zephyrians coordinated the complex assembly process." "It's amazing how well everyone works together now," Yuki observed. Mark nodded. "Crisis has a way of bringing out the best in people, even alien people." The transformation of galactic society had been remarkable. Species that had been enemies for centuries now shared technology freely. Trade barriers had been eliminated. Cultural exchange programs flourished. The threat from outside reality had united the galaxy in ways that peace never could, but not everyone was happy with the changes. On the industrial world of Corvat Prime, a group of hegemony separatists held a secret meeting. They were led by General Crix, a military officer who believed that his species was giving up too much to the joint defense effort. We are weakening ourselves, Crix argued to his followers. Sharing our weapons technology with other species, allowing aliens to command our ships. This alliance will be the death of hegemony independence. But General, said one of his supporters, the Void Lords are real. We've seen the evidence. Perhaps. But why should we sacrifice our sovereignty to fight a threat that may never come? The barriers are holding. The rifts are being sealed. Maybe it's time to reclaim what is ours. General Crix was not the only one having doubts. Similar groups existed among several species, all questioning whether the massive sacrifices required for the defense effort were really necessary. Deep in the void between realities, Commander Ryan Davis led a patrol of mixed-species ships through the dangerous dimensional boundary zones. Ryan had been promoted after his actions at New Haven and now commanded one of the most important missions in the galaxy. Sensors are detecting unusual activity in grid reference OMEGA-7, reported his science officer, a court named Vel. The dimensional barrier is fluctuating. Ryan studied the readings on his screen. How bad is it? The barrier is weakening. If it fails completely, a major rift could open directly into the core worlds. The core worlds were home to nearly 1 trillion beings from dozens of species. If a rift opened there, the Void Lords could pour through and devastate the heart of galactic civilization. Signal the fleet. All ships converge on Omega-7 and get me a direct line to Admiral Morrison. Jake received the emergency communication. While reviewing defense reports on the Unity, the news was worse than anything they had faced since the crisis began. A rift that size could destroy everything, Jake told his assembled staff. How long do we have? 6 hours before the barrier fails completely, reported Dr. Elena Rodriguez. The nearest reality anchor is still under construction. It won't be ready in time. What about the Devourers? Can they reinforce the barrier? They're already trying, but their energy is running low. They've been maintaining barriers across the galaxy for months without rest. Jake made a decision that would risk everything. We're going to have to improvise. Elena, is it possible to turn a ship into a reality anchor? Elena stared at him. Theoretically, yes. But it would require modifications that would make the ship uninhabitable. And whoever pilots it through the rift would never come back. The bridge fell silent as everyone realized what Jake was suggesting. Someone would have to sacrifice their life to save the core worlds? I'll do it, Jake said simply. No, Elena replied firmly. You're needed here to command the fleet. I'll go. Elena, you're the only one who understands the science behind this. Which is exactly why it has to be me. I know how to calibrate the modifications. Anyone else would just be guessing. Before Jake could argue further, Commander Ryan Davis contacted them from the void. Admiral, the barrier is failing faster than predicted. We have maybe 2 hours. Jake looked at Elena, seeing the determination in her eyes. She had made up her mind, and nothing he could say would change it. Do it, he said quietly. Elena took her science team to the engineering bay where they began modifying the research vessel Discovery. They ripped out life support systems and installed reality manipulation equipment. The ship became a flying bomb designed to explode the fabric of space itself. As Elena prepared for her final mission, news of the crisis spread throughout the galaxy. The separatist movements that had been questioning the alliance suddenly went quiet. General Crix himself volunteered his ships to help defend the core worlds. We may have our differences, Crix told Jake over the communication link, but we will not let our galaxy die while we argue about politics. Elena's ship approached the failing barrier as alarms sounded throughout the fleet. The dimensional rift was already beginning to open, and through it, dark shapes could be seen moving. The Void Lords were coming. Elena, you don't have to do this, Jake said over the radio. Yes, I do, she replied. This is what we've been preparing for. This is why humanity kept the secret for 50 years. To protect everyone, no matter what it costs. The Discovery flew directly into the rift, its modified reality anchor activating just as the Void Lords began to pour through. The explosion. that followed was visible from light years away, a brilliant flash that sealed the dimensional tier permanently. Elena Rodriguez was gone, but the core worlds were safe. In the aftermath, the galaxy mourned its heroes and celebrated its survival. The separatist movements dissolved as species realized that their differences were meaningless compared to the threats they faced together. Jake stood in the memorial hall on Unity Station, looking at Elena's name carved alongside thousands of others who had given their lives to protect reality itself. The war was far from over, but the galaxy had proven that it could stand together against anything outside the station. Ships from every known species worked side by side, building defenses and sealing rifts. The map of the galaxy now extended far beyond its previous boundaries, reaching into dimensions that most people couldn't even imagine, but they were no longer afraid of the unknown. They had learned that sometimes the greatest threats could be faced only by standing together,